Where's the camera, by the way? Oh, wow. Are we going? Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name's Tom. I'm from SGI. Thank you, first of all, for Flagstone for hosting us tonight. If we get a bit of a round of applause. So, yeah, good to see some old faces and some new faces. We've got a great night in store with some lightning talks with the guys from Flagstone, followed by David Whitney, who is the Director of Architecture from NewDay. Yeah, afterwards, we are going to be heading to the bar across the road, which I imagine probably you've already popped into already. And yes, we have got pizza on the way for the break in the meantime as well. But yeah, look, less for me. First of all, I'll pass you over to Ian, and then we'll be hearing from Danielle from Flagstone.
Thanks, Tom. Again, welcome everybody. Hope you find Flagstone as wonderful as we find it. You're more than welcome, and it's really lovely to see you all. Who is Flagstone? We're a savings provider, over 70 banks. We're growing, we're profitable. We've got about 100 engineers, and it is beautiful to see people here interacting with our community, and we've got lots of stories to tell from our engineers that we really love. So hope you have a lovely time, and without any further ado, I think let's get some more interesting content. Thank you. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, cool. What do you got?
Mm-hmm.
Keep getting someone's car out there, Bentley or something that I can connect to. So that'd be really interesting if I get this presentation up. I'll try and do the slideshow by interpretive dance. Yeah, you can't get connected. So just bear with us. I can assure you this did work. I tried it earlier. Now comes professional. Hang on, it's not started yet.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Danielle. I'm a senior back-end engineer here at Flagstone, and I'm really excited to be here with you this evening to share with you a process that can help prevent security vulnerabilities before a single line of code has been written. Did you know most security vulnerabilities are introduced early on in the software development lifecycle? And so with that, in today's ever-evolving cybersecurity landscape, securing applications remains a critical challenge, with attackers continuing to find new ways to exploit vulnerabilities. If your company lacks awareness of cybersecurity processes such as threat modeling, especially in the early stages, they face vulnerable to attacks, which can impact your company's application, assets, and reputation. This highlights the need for your company to be proactive and shift left, which means carrying out security tasks much more earlier on in your software development lifecycle. So coming up in this talk, we're going to cover what and why you should threat model, how you can actually carry out threat modeling, and cover off a brief example. So when you're building a house, when is the best time to add a bathroom? It would be in the planning phase before any concrete has been poured or bricks have been laid. This saves you time, money, and is way less stressful. And the same principles apply in software development and cybersecurity. We've all seen this graph before. As you progress through the software development lifecycle, the cost to remediate bugs, defects, vulnerabilities significantly increases. And this famous quote by Benjamin Franklin says, "If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail." And this really highlights that it's essential to come up with your non-functional requirements at the very start of your projects. Often when we're building applications, we focus on the product requirements. So things such as usability, performance, and security is often an overlooked aspect. When you're in those refinement meetings, you don't often say, oh, what would happen if there was a DDoS attack on this endpoint? What would happen if there was a cross-site scripting attack? So threat modeling is all about having these conversations earlier on. And this is the official OWASP definition. And it's basically about protecting something of value. So how many people here work with health data? Okay, nobody here? How many people here work with customer data? A lot of people. And finance data? Yeah, again, a lot of people. So everybody here has something that they need to protect and that is valuable to your business. So it's good, I'm in the right place. And we've all seen the headlines, right? And they seem to be progressively getting worse and more frequent. And recently, British retailer Marks and Spencer's was offline for 46 days, and this was an estimated loss of 300 million. Imagine if your application was offline for 1 day, let alone 46 days. It would be disastrous, right? So you don't want to be one of those headlines. So what's at stake? So as I briefly mentioned, financial costs through loss of revenue, or could be through FCA fines, GDPR fines, and these things all add up. Infrastructure costs, so if you are scaling up in the number of API instances to deal with like an ongoing DDoS attack, this can significantly increase your cloud bills, and we all know they're already expensive as they are. And this can lead to delays in development, so not achieving your sprint goals, and it could even be as worse as delays in innovation, so you lose that competitive edge in the market. And finally, this can have operational strain. So if you're dealing with a security incident, you may need to pull people in from multiple teams, the security teams, product teams, people from all across your organization to deal with this. And if you're an on-call engineer and you're being paged at 3 o'clock in the morning, this can be exhausting and it can lead to burnout and eventually people making mistakes and leaving your company. So it's really important to prioritize these things. So how can we actually put threat modeling into action? So we can use something called the 4-question framework. So the reason that this is so effective is because it's accessible. You don't need to be a security expert to use this. And this can help you identify threats early on and build in security by design. So let's take a look at these 4 questions and see how simple it really is. So these questions are, what are we working on? What can go wrong? What are we going to do about it? And finally, did we do a good job? So let's take a look at each question and talk about what steps they involve. So what are we working on? So this is where you'll have everybody in the room and you set the scene, do a little brief introduction of the feature you're working on. Then you start whiteboarding, so drawing out your existing architecture, then add in your new architecture alongside it. And another way you can represent this data is through data flow diagram. So how does the data get from the customer into your backend system and back out again? And this involves multiple people. Threat modeling is all about collaboration with people from diverse backgrounds. So now we get to the interesting part, what can go wrong? So this is where you put your Mr. Robot hat on and you get to live your Mr. Robot wildest fantasies. And so this is where you identify what the potential threats are. And this is about collaboration, listening to everybody's points of view in the meeting so you can really get an understanding. And for this, you can use structured approaches such as security checklist or more in detailed approaches that are tailored towards threat modeling. Then finally, when you've identified those threats, you've got to talk about how can we mitigate these threats. So this is where you go through each threat and you talk about the mitigations. And it's really important with threat modeling that you categorize these threats. So always remember, risk is likelihood times impact. When you are doing your threat modeling sessions, you will find a lot of risks, a lot of threats. So prioritizing them and coming up with agreements with your team, with your company, what your SLAs are around them. Do you just want to focus on the critical and high vulnerabilities first and then tackle the more, the less severe ones later? And this really leads to integrating these security requirements into your development work. So taking them to your refinement meetings, taking them to your planning sessions, and working on those alongside your feature development. Then finally, did we do a good job? So after you've carried out your threat modeling, do you have a security approach? Do you know what you're doing? And this can help feed into security checklists. So for example, every time you're adding a new endpoint, you could check things like, does it have rate limiting, circuit breaking, and so on. And threat modeling is not just a once and done process. As threats evolve, so should your threat modeling process. So when is the best time to carry out threat modeling? It would be during the design phase before any code has been written. This helps you come up with your requirements first. If you're doing any major architecture changes, so for example, merging 2 platforms together or swapping cloud providers. And if you want to get an idea of your security, you can use this as a security review. And then that can really help you focus on the critical and high areas. And if you've had any security incidents, you can use this as the bells are going off outside. So yeah, you can use this as a tool to retrospectively look at things and prioritize what issues you want to work on. So who should you involve in your threat modeling process? So you've got developers here. Not all heroes wear capes, but in this one example, we do. So we are the domain experts. We know about the backdoors, the unauthenticated endpoints, the things that shouldn't be there, but keep us up at night. Then you've got architects, so you've got your architects, staff engineers, principal engineers. It's good to get these people on board early in case you need to re-architect or change any of your designs. Security engineers, so these are your security experts, so you can learn about the latest threats from these people, and it's really important to collaborate so everybody increases their knowledge. Then you've got stakeholders, so say you're working with multiple teams, like payments team, checkout team, good to get them involved early in case you need to do any rework. And then product owners, business stakeholders, is really important to align technical and business risk. Business stakeholders will have a better understanding of the business's appetite to risk. So for example, if you're adding a new field to an endpoint, is it commercially sensitive? What would happen if our competitors see it? So there are plenty of free and open source tools that you can use, or if your team are all based in the same office, get around a whiteboard, use pens, use post-it notes to do these things. Don't let tooling slow you down from starting threat modeling. At the end of the day, it's just boxes and lines. So I'm going to cover off a brief example now. So what are we building this sprint? As a business customer, I want to download a VAT receipt for my purchases so that I can claim back VAT and keep an accurate financial records for accounting purposes. So let's take a look at an example of how we could threat model that. So here, what are we working on? So we've drawn out the existing system, and you'll get the gist of it. We generate a receipt, store it in S3, add it to the service, and then surface that on the gateway. Then customers can download that. So what are the potential threats that could happen here? So these yellow post-it notes, these are potential threats. Let's zoom in onto one of them and see what one. So on the API gateway, you could have a DDoS attack, which could prevent genuine customers from being able to use your system. And so after we've identified all the threats, now it's time to identify how we can mitigate them as a group. So these green post-it notes are mitigations here. So let's take a look at one of the examples. So in our example before, DDoS attack on the API gateway, these three green post-it notes here are mitigations. So you could implement rate limiting, traffic shaping, and use the CDN to mitigate these risks. Then after you've done your threat modeling session, it's really important to document these in your backlogs and then assign the risk levels to them so that that can help in your planning sessions on what stories you actually want to bring into the sprints. So there's lots of benefits for threat modeling. So these include defining security requirements from the beginning. And this can really help enhance the understanding within your team. So engineers learning from the security engineers, product people learning more about the domains, and overall everybody's knowledge increases on the feature that you are building. And this can lead to cost savings as you're being proactive rather than reactive. And this can help spot hidden design flaws that traditional methods such as code reviews, automated security scanning may overlook as you're taking a step back and taking a look at the bigger picture. And this can help you consider new attack vectors. And overall, this leads to better quality and design of your system. So now that you know about threat modeling, do you think that you've been involved in an incident that could have been prevented? I know I sure have. Threat modeling is just writing all the terrible things an attacker could do before they actually do it. Don't wait until testing or development to think about security, or even worse, for attackers to exploit flaws in your production application. Prioritize security early on in your software development lifecycle. Using a shift-left approach helps protect your company's application, assets, and reputation. Integrate threat modeling into your next project to help drive a security-first culture at your company. Thank you for listening. I've got a QR code and link here with some learning resources around threat modeling. I've got some time now for any questions. Yeah.
How do you decide where to draw the line? On top of that, it's likely that it's probably covered perhaps the previous threat model. We should protect our network. What point does it become rehashing?
Yeah. Yes.
Where's the cut?
Yeah. So that's the thing with security, is that it can be an infinite game, but you can't let that be the case. You need to draw the line, and like you were saying, if you've done this in all the services, and that can feed into your security checklist, and all teams must do those type of things. It's really important to identify the trust boundaries, and also as well identify the risk levels, because if you're fixing low risk things that are really unlikely to happen, all your sprints will just be full of security things. You won't be able to do any feature development. So I think is aligning your technical and business risk. Yeah. Yeah.
One of the unspoken challenges in security is the human factor, because you can do everything right as a software engineer, but you can't stop somebody from clicking the phishing link or using the same password for everything, or in the case of my company, receiving a USB in an unmarked envelope and putting it inside your laptop.
No.
So do you think, therefore, there's a ceiling to threat modeling and protecting yourself?
That's a very interesting question. I think threat modeling can be applied to everything, and I think it's really important to share those learnings. It sounds like your company unfortunately had quite a few security incidents, but it's really important to learn from those incidents and educate. Yeah.
Yeah, luckily we passed to infrastructure guys, and they isolated the laptop and the USB, and the person involved had a stern talking to. But yeah, it's like you say, there's infinite possibilities. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I agree with all of most just for the views online.
Yeah, so I agree with most of the points that you discussed about threat modeling and how you can shift left. But in certain scenarios, you can only do so much. Like for example, DDoS attacks, right?
Yeah.
So I work for an industry which is notoriously famous for DDoS attacks, and especially when the spike of user traffic is very high.
Yeah.
So then you implement something such as rate limiting, or you block IP address or whatever, right? So how do you create a balance between blocking attacking ones versus making sure that the legit customers requests are going through?
Yeah.
I know rate limiting is an option, but still there's got to be there's a point where either you reject all the requests from a specific region, or you just so it's just a trade-off, isn't it? So how do you?
Yeah, so with things like that, it's important to have like auto scaling on your API instances to deal with any peak of traffic. Blocking IP addresses, that can be quite risky, because people could like cycle through like residential IP addresses of genuine customers, and that could result into like loss of orders, loss of revenue. So yeah, it's like really important to like have agreement with the business on these sides of things, on how you want to like deal with these attacks. And you can like build in like special logic into your endpoints to mitigate that. I can speak to you after about that.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of questions really. I suppose one around like what are your techniques for like building this into your development process? Of that. Yeah. Yeah. So what kind of techniques have you got for building this into your development, your day-to-day development process? I suppose as I won't lead the witness here on what I think the answer could be. That was one question, and then another one was around just like how you can actually measure this in terms of like the value that it's adding or the costs that you're not incurring.
Yeah.
Because I always feel with some of this stuff, it's a bit like having a burglar alarm on your house. It's like some of it can be a bit of a deterrent, but I can never actually measure, you know, the fact that I've got a burglar alarm, the amount of thieves that it's scared off. So yeah.
Yeah, so for your first question, it would be like around having agreement with the like business. Every time we start a new project, threat modeling should be part of that. So having it as part of like a project kickoff checklist, and you really need security champions to help drive this across your company.
Yeah. Do you build it into your definition of done or definition of ready for user stories and definition of done? And what about PR policies or anything like that?
Yeah, so yeah, you can build it into part of that. Is like should be like you should say like you must do this if you are doing a new project. So like like new endpoint, working with a like new third party endpoint, stuff like that. And then your second question was like, how do you measure if this is successful? So a way that you can do that is to go through all of the threats that you identified, and do you have mitigations for those? Do you have any previous security incidents in those areas? Like how many people were working on them? How many hours did you spend? How much did it cost your company? But yeah, those things are like really hard to measure. Like if you're not under attack, that's good. But
do you ever look at any observability metrics and sort of kind of correlate that back with the decisions you've made?
Yeah, it's really important to have like observability metrics built in from the start, so you can like review like your endpoints and like your key metrics, like order flow, stuff like that.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Good timing. Right, now I normally do things quite breathless, but I'm literally breathless. If anyone's got questions, can you all just go to one side and make it a bit easier next time? Right, I should just get my presentation up. Are we still presenting? Fabulous. Good to go? Excellent. Well, good evening. I'm going to conclude the lightning talks, and obviously there's only two tonight, and that's a shame because you've all missed out on Louis. I'm pretty certain most of you came here just to find out how much he loves Below Deck. But his talk, if you ever get an opportunity to hear it, it's about hacking a NPM package, very relevant these days as well, right? So if you ever do get a chance, please do look that one up. Need the prop. So I was going to call this talk not Beyond T-shaped. I was going to call it Why Your Peers and Team All Love and Hate You. I was a bit worried though, because I can see you all look quite tasty, and I might probably need to run. You might not very much like this talk. And also, I'll have some difficult questions in the morning with my team. So I didn't bother with that. I thought, well, let's go with the T-shaped. I've just realised my slide isn't working properly at the moment, so bear with me. I'll just carry on. So look, you've set the bar high. I saw how you all interacted with Danielle. You all know how to raise your arms. So, and by the way, this is for everyone. It doesn't have to be just for engineers, and you'll find out why. And for those who are online, you can join in too. I won't see your hands, but I will feel them. So look, if you consider yourself a back-end engineer, can you raise your hands, please? Excellent, thanks ever so much. Now, if you consider yourself a front-end engineer, could you also raise your hand? Represent, there's a few of us. Excellent. Now, if you are a full-stack engineer, I really do hope that you put your hands up for both of those. And if you didn't, this is your moment. And also for those who are non-software type engineers, data engineers, platform engineers, can you please put your hand up? Fabulous, thanks ever so much. I knew you were a good crowd. Now, we've just pigeonholed ourselves by skill set alone, haven't we? And what I'm hoping to do is show you that it isn't just about skill set. So let's go for a walk. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm just going to pace backwards and forwards. You can stay seated. You all look quite tired. Just keep on your in your seats. Now, I'm going to have to. My slides are not working, I'm afraid, so it's not very good. Excuse me. I'm just going to start the slideshow again. Now, where's IT support when I need them? Okay. Let's just move on. So look, we just focused on skill sets. And when we think about focusing on skill sets, it kind of reflects in how a lot of organizations give us job titles, right? The back-end engineer. Yeah, call a duck a duck. And that's one of those things that makes it very easy for people to know what you do. The challenge we have with that is, as a team, it isn't about what you do. It's about what you deliver, the outcomes. And so when we think about that, what we find ourselves in is a situation where we need to be more kind of full stack mindset, right? In other words, as a team, we kind of need to bring all of our skills together to be able to deliver. And if we take that one step further, that's really just having a team mindset. One of the things about having a team mindset is we can all deliver together and take everyone's skills and just make sure that it all works in tandem. But how do we do that? But before I say anything about that, let's talk about job titles. We'll go back to that. We went from developer to insert skill set here, engineer, back-end engineer, front-end engineer, and so on, to insert main here, engineer, payments engineer, mobile engineer. And what we're seeing a trend of is simply product engineer. Okay, a reflection on the need to emphasize the fact that we're delivering versus how we're delivering it. So let's get to the G's, shall we? Finally, we get to the G's. Glue. Now, you're probably going to say to me, I've heard of glue work. I've heard people talk about glue work. And you know glue work when you see it, because you don't see it. It's very much unseen. It's that documentation that's getting updated. It's that run book you didn't know you needed when it's 2 a.m. in the morning and a klaxon's going off and you're hoping your partner doesn't wake up because you can't find your phone anymore to acknowledge that alert. And then you go along and you find that you had a very easy evening because a run book was already there. Okay, that is glue work. Glue work are all those essential tasks that just keep things moving smoothly. Then we have grease. Okay, so if glue makes things move smoothly by the fact that it holds things together and stops them from falling apart, grease is about speed. It's about reducing friction. And you know grease. You arrive at stand-up and one of the engineers says, hey, I spotted that the overnight tests were failing. I've already fixed them. We'll have no problems with the pipelines today. They say, hey, I've been working on this thing. I went and spoke to one of the staff engineers and I realized that you also needed some information. So I asked them, it's already in the ticket. You won't need to go and reach out to them. You can just crack on today. Now, greasers, I probably need to work on the naming of these things. Greasers are the ones that are first going to reach out and give you help. Hey, I'm really super stacked right now, but you know what? I've seen this problem before. Let's jump on a call and we'll get you moving. Gears. You probably saw this one coming, I'm guessing, particularly the mechanical people. Gears, right? So we can have glue, but without gears, there's nothing to bind. We can have grease, but without gears, there's nothing to lubricate. Gears are the workhorses of a team. They're the ones that are pushing the team forward. That big story, it's already done. That gnarly piece of work, deployed. The other big story, I'm already on it. That's gears. They are the people that are pushing the team forward all the time. For those of you old enough, scumbag Steve, yeah. There'll be no questions from you later. So, you know, I've just talked through how grease, how gears, how glue help a team get things done. And probably when I was saying that, you pictured yourself or maybe one of your teammates in that, okay? And these aren't things that we are doing, right? Because, well, we are already doing them. That's the point. You probably need to label it. You might need to recognize, hey, that looks like some glue work. Hey, that looks like some grease work. Let's label it. And then we can understand how we're moving through those. It needs to be done in harmony with the rest of the team. And by that, I don't mean locking people into particular ways of working, right? You can't just do that, right? It needs to be in tandem with the rest of the team based upon the needs of what people need at that moment in time. If you think about a high-performing team, it's probably like ballet. It's all just moving around, looking good. No pirouettes from me today. Old war. So there will be occasions where a team needs to kind of focus on one of those kind of modes, right? It could be like a discovery phase. It could be crunch time, right? And in those cases, that's where supporting roles like engineering managers, staff engineers, product owners, they can fill them gaps so the team can keep focused on the thing that they need to do. But we can't stay like that. It's a bit like a muscle. If you don't keep using it and keep going through the different modes, you're going to stiffen up. You find it very difficult to move together as a team like ballet. Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about when it comes to G-shaped. Like I said, you probably are thinking, oh yeah, you know, I'm probably the gears person. You know, are you the grease? Yeah? Is Sarah the glue? Abdul the gears? Right? Now, why are they those people? Because I've just said we should be moving through all of those different modes. And what we can find, and I've spoken to quite a few people, you can see quite a lot of posts about this kind of thing. Normally it's about glue work, that it's become almost normalized that people stick to one of those patterns, particularly glue work. And I think sometimes that's the weight of expectation of your seniority. You might be expected to always be the grease. Depends upon your organizational culture as well, right? Also, gender. You see that a lot in glue work. People getting fixed into particular modes. And that can be because of a weight of expectation. Could be because what they think is what's expected of them. Could also just be because of what you're comfortable doing. So as a good teammate, we need to recognize that and actually really help people be able to switch through those different modes. So thanks for listening. I've got one ask of you. Please look around and identify how flexible you and your teammates are. Help people to be able to switch through those different modes and kind of just be G-shaped. Thank you. There'll be a small interval now. 10, 15 minutes, is that right? You can do a bit of networking, stretch your legs. I did say there wasn't going to be any more exercise. I lied, but it is drinks bound, so
Up a bit more. I guess I'll twiddle the knob. Phrasing. Twiddling the knob, twiddling the knob. There we go. That's okay. That's fine. Awesome. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. So I need to hold all my bits, my accoutrements. Hey, everybody, you having a good time? Good lightning talks. Really impressed. Well done. Very interesting. Loved it. So thank you. Thank you for turning up. So I'm here to talk about everybody's favorite topic in 2025, AI. Oh, no one's ever heard that before, right? Okay, don't worry, I have nothing to sell you. so it's instantly a better AI talk than like 55% of the AI talks you see. So I'm David, I'm the Director of Engineering at NewDay. Don't worry about it, we're a credit card company. Some people haven't heard of us. I've got a death metal t-shirt on with the logo, it's quite cool. That's all you really need to know. This talk is really about where we're going and how we can deal with the dissonance that feels like it's surrounding what otherwise would be kind of a set of really interesting, mundane technical innovations, right? So before we start, I want to play a game. Hands up in the room if you can write code. Okay, excellent, right? That's good. Put your hands back up. Hands back up. Now keep them up if you think code is going to remove AI is going to remove your job in the near to middle distance. Yeah, I thought so. Hands up in the room if you don't write code. Keep them up if you think AI is going to remove their jobs into the near to middle distance. Right, this is this wonderful dissonance where all the non-technical people think that we're kind of there with AI, and everyone that ever uses a computer is like, absolutely, I'm not allowed to swear, no. Absolutely not the one. Cool, interesting. Right, so I'm David, and I'm explicitly an AI moderate. Right? And when I say AI moderate, what I mean is I think that AI is simultaneously one of the most interesting and exciting things that's happened in my 32 years as a programmer, but equally the most overhyped, misdescribed, poorly marketed, and generally misunderstood piece of technology that I've seen maybe in the last 20 years. Right? The two things can be true at the same time. And AI is really difficult to talk about, especially in 2025, because it's become such a poorly debated, kind of thoroughly misunderstood and quickly changing space that it makes understanding what is real and what's hubris really, really hard to comprehend, right? And the truth is this, it's in the best interest of the people trying to sell you AI, to overhype AI and its real capabilities, but dismissing it outright is equally as foolish. Because despite the ghouls, right? There's always ghouls trying to like bloody sell you things. Can I use bloody? That's better. You know, there's all these people that are going to chase the tail of technology trends. You know, you've got the blockchain and the NFT bros, and all those people are now trying to sell you AI. Like it's absolutely the same people. And it's a lot of them, right? Almost that entire audience is now on the AI gravy train. But I don't think the two things are even remotely similar. Right? They're not. So it's easy to see when you look at the people really involved in building out and betting big on this technology that, you know, neural nets are not new. ML models are not new. Transformer models a little bit newer, but not really new. Exceptionally smart people have been working to this point for a long time. It isn't a get-rich-quick scheme in the slightest, right? It's decades of research and a huge amount of investment that's been slowly rolling onwards for about 2 decades to get to where we are in its current form. And I think this is all kind of set against this kind of controversial backdrop of the training data that's processed by large organizations to produce these vast general purpose models that push against kind of the edges of existing laws around kind of fair use and people's personal ethics. And it really, you know, challenges human exceptionalism. And we're going to talk a lot about the human exceptionalism later. I'm equally really tired of bad faith critique. Like, there's nothing more boring than someone being like, well, I've never used a chat GPT and I never would, right? It's just like, Jesus Christ, like, don't be midwits. Like, don't critique things that you haven't used. Silly, silly people. It's embarrassing and they need to stop. So in the day job and just casually, I've kind of been experimenting with generative AI for the last couple of years, like basically every other programmer in the world. And you know, obviously with some of the more regular use cases like Copilot, but I've also been working on a few other really constrained tests of varying sizes. And I've had some promising to positive results that I want to talk about here a little bit. And it's not going to be revolution, but it's going to be evolution, hopefully. All right, so does anyone actually know about the transformer model thing? Put your hands up if you've heard of transformer models. Cool, right, half the room. You've definitely used transformer models. So this is the reason we're talking about AI today. Right, so in 2017, Google Brain researchers published a seminal paper titled "Attention is All You Need." And what that did is it introduced what they called the transformer architecture, a paradigm shift in natural language processing and deep learning. Now, before this, sequence modeling relied heavily on recurrent neural networks, RNNs, including LSTMs and GRUs. They're full of horrible TLAs, right? All these data science people. And what these models did is they processed data sequentially, which kind of limited parallelization and really struggled with long-range dependencies when they were trying to generate output. Now, transformer models broke this mold completely by eliminating recurrence and introducing this idea of self-attention, right? Now, self-attention is the mechanism that allows the model to weigh the relevance of every word in a sentence to every other word simultaneously. Basically, they put parallelism into the way generative neural nets worked. Now, this led to faster training, a better scalability, and really good performance across tasks like machine translation, summarization, and question answering, right? The obvious things. Now, the architecture's parallelizable nature made it ideal for modern hardware, especially GPUs with lots of parallel processing units, and it accelerated adoption across the entire industry. Now, the team behind the paper were inspired by both the technical limitations of conceptual analogies, including things like nonlinear language structures as depicted in Hollywood movies like Arrival. They watched a film and got an idea, is basically the short version. So subsequently, the people that wrote that paper went on and founded a number of the AI startups that you see today because they felt limited to capitalize on the idea at Google, which is kind of interesting. So if you've used generative AI, you're absolutely using transformer models today. Now, understanding AI is interesting, and it's mostly because of its origins in research, in my opinion. And now kind of because it's become this hot button kind of political and ethical debate surrounding AI, it makes understanding the landscape and crucially, if it's any good, really difficult. But here's the truth, like generative AI is just a statistical model, right? We know this. As engineers, we know this. As programmers, we know this. So each new model has an ever widening context window that is capable of generating a mode average output from a bunch of context. That's all it is, data in, average output out. It's built on top of neural networks and transformer models. And what it's really good at doing is processing large volumes of information in ways that humans are generally really bad at, right? And that's kind of the interesting evolution here. And as a technique, that's why it's one of the most interesting things that's happened in my technical career, right? Because for the first time ever, we have a general purpose algorithmic approach for processing generic unstructured data. Like from a computer science point of view, that's fascinating, right? Because every other ML thing prior to this point, you want to process data into a machine learning model, you write some code to process the data, right? So if you worked in the space, you'll have done this before. So the fact that there's just like a generally applicable programming style for this now is kind of a massive leap. It's terrific. I can't stress enough how interesting it is. It opens up an entire category of different spaces for experimentation and evolution, in my opinion. But to me personally, AI is just a tool, right? It's the electric screwdriver to my traditional screwdriver as a programmer. It's a jackhammer to a sledgehammer, right? And not all tools are fit for all contexts, and this applies to generative AI also. But what it is really great at is removing toil, like really, really, really great today at removing toil. Being applied to situations where you need the average response or to sift through a large amount of average data, right? And you start thinking about that, and there's loads of stuff in the world that counts for that. And in the hands of experts that understand how to drive AI tooling, normally in the hands of programmers, to be honest, it's just basically a force multiplier in your day-to-day work if you understand what the thing is rather than what other people think the thing is. It's not going to do your job for you, but it's going to get you a long way down the road quickly, just so long as you judiciously and attentively author the work with it. like actually from Microsoft's point, I think Copilot was like the best brand name they could ever manage. And then obviously because Microsoft, they attached that brand name to 20 other products and completely ruined it, right? Very, very good from the team that named you Enter ID. So I think a lot of the confusion around AI and if it's really any good is really a naming and marketing problem, right? Because AI sounds a lot cooler than a statistical transformer model, right? Like it's not artificial intelligence. We've all seen sci-fi. It's not that thing. So what I've started doing when I talk about AI and model stuff is I tend to use the phrase model-assisted development because I think that kind of captures the spirit of what the thing really is. And it neatly sidesteps any questions around whether this is real intelligence or whether we're in a sci-fi movie or that kind of thing, right? Or if the model is reasoning or thinking, because the marketing for all these models use those words liberally. And like, they're not. Obviously, they're not. But it doesn't make them any less useful. And I think people get really caught up critiquing what people say the thing is, rather than what it actually does. So, God, this is intelligence as a word is really flawed. I was going to swear again. People have made the mistake of thinking that intelligence in this context is some kind of measure of how hard a computer can think, how hard it can do work, when in fact I think it's probably a latent property of data. And this was like a bit of a mind-exploding moment for me when I was thinking about these tools a couple of years ago. And this is probably a result of some of the more traditional computer science thinking, where the amount of work something can do more or less equates to the quality of the output. The harder you work, the better the thing is, right? And this directly relates to our history and our lineage, right? So clock cycles and operations per cycle and clock speeds traditionally were the way that you track technological progress. You got a faster CPU and it could think harder and do more, therefore it was better, right? But let's think about this really slowly, because I think this is a really credible way to think about what we see in the world today. If what we think of as intelligence is nothing more than a latent property of data that reveals itself when it reaches a certain critical mass, okay? So, and we finally found a tool, like a torch in the dark, to shine at the masses of data we have been digitally collecting. The intelligence of a body of data is like its weight or its dimension. It's just a property. It's not about thinking, right? And that kind of tracks, like it's kind of a statistically average response, again. So if we think of intelligence as a statistically average response that becomes observable at large volumes, not a measure of power or performance at all, actually you can start to think about lots of more interesting things, right? So I like this mental model because it highlights how we can take this same technique that we use to get the next work in a sequence and apply it to plenty of like non-text or even non-human data sources, right? Like if we're simply investigating the latent intelligence of a data source, we could collect all the data about solar flares and ask the sun when it's next going to flare. Right? I don't mean ask in natural language, but like the same technique works. You can inquire about predictable properties of data from a significant volume of data. I think that's kind of amazing, like actually really, really super amazing. I think that's why all the people that were doing this research got really excited about it, right? I get it, it's just not really very marketable. So I think what you can do once you think about intelligence as a property of the data is you can shift your thinking to assess the quality of models, not on, hey, can this thing solve an entire problem? But instead, how well does the knowledge contained within this model accelerate this work I am trying to do? Right? You're asking a different question. So all of the people that are like, oh, these models effing suck and they can never work because they're never right. It's like, yeah, I agree with you. But did they get you 80% of the way there in 10 seconds? Cool, start there. Right? And I think this has been a useful mental shift for me as I think about what I will and won't use models for. Now, I suppose in some kind of like existential way, people are struggling with this, right? This interpretation of a statistical model that produces a mean average output as a form of intelligence, because when you casually observe these models, they kind of perform as well as their training data, right? which is to say, as well as the average person. And that kind of makes you think that, you know, these models, when combined with other more traditional systems integration techniques, they actually often outperform the traditionally averagely intelligent person. And especially the data in their original training sets, especially with iteration, and especially with citation and external input, right? And the problem in realizing that the mean average response are kind of okay a lot of the time, combined with a bit of introspection, makes people wonder if they themselves also aren't really kind of the mean average response to their unstructured life inputs, right? Like it's a little bit like, oh, existential dread. Maybe I too just listened to 10 albums and now I think I know a lot about music, right? Like, so I think this is like really at the very heart of why a handful of years ago when this stuff started gaining prominence, that we saw our first occurrence of like the AI doomers, right? The Google engineer, what was his name? It's in my notes. Blake Lemoine, great name, who was convinced the chatbot Lambda was sentient, and he was basically fired for talking rubbish to the press about it, right? And obviously he was wrong, right? It was a tremendously stupid way to torpedo your career publicly, but whatever. So human exceptionalism challenges your media literacy, right? Transformer-based language models have achieved this remarkable success, but not necessarily in domains where precision or expertise matters most. In fact, their dominance in certain creative and communicative tasks is less a testament to their brilliance and actually more a reflection on the environments that they thrive in, right? Places where accuracy is often optional and mediocrity is often mistaken for competence. Oh, a bit dark. By design, they're trained to reflect the center of their distribution. Right, so I made this observation recently that like programming language models often repeat the worst possible patterns and practices of any given ecosystem. It's a truism. So of course they do. That's what they've been trained on. And you know, it's the same with anything, right? So you know, it's not a surprise where they perform best in domains where the bar for quality is low, and where most observers lack the tools or the training to distinguish good from merely plausible. So let's take visual art. Anyone do like a humanities degree or study composition or painting? One, amazing. So you might get away with this. So the average person really isn't equipped to critique composition, form, or technique, right? They're just not, they don't know anything about it. Decades of devaluing humanities have left a cultural vacuum where aesthetic literacy is rare, right? And in that kind of landscape, models that generate derivative, incoherent, or stylistically confused images can still impress, right? They can impress the average person because they don't even know what they're looking at. And the audience doesn't know what good looks like, right? Poorly composed mulch passes for creativity. Writing suffers a similar fate, right? The general level of written communication with your average human is like astonishingly low, right? And even lower than when you expect readers to pass grammar, diction, or rhetorical structure, right? So in a world built on bite-sized fragments like tweets and captions and sloganism, the ability to generate coherent paragraphs from statistical soup of internet content feels like a revolution, right? But it's not good writing, it's just more writing. So this dynamic also explains the sharp drop-off in model performance across less trafficked languages. The statistical scaffolding kind of collapses when the training data thins out, right? So without a flood of mediocre examples to average across, actually these models flounder, and the illusion of competence depends on the oversaturation of content, which again leads credence to the idea that intelligence only occurs at a critical mass of data. So their success is not in producing truth or quality. This is a non-goal. I think everybody assessing the models as if they're meant to contain truth is just misleading themselves. It's in producing that looks good enough to people who've been conditioned to accept good enough as standard. And then finally, the AI comes for you, right? The computer software people. Now, I find this really fascinating, right? So when we zoom in on code itself and the role of agents in generating it, the success of code completion becomes less mysterious and more a product or a byproduct of the latent properties inherent to software itself. So what I mean by that is programming languages are defined by constrained grammars, rigid syntactic rules that sharply limit ambiguity. So this structure makes them really easy for a model, much easier than natural language, which is fluid and context dependent. So code, by contrast, is really predictable. It follows patterns, and those patterns are abundantly well documented. So there's this kind of this truth that the training data available to language models in the programming space is so vast. Open source kind of did this, right? Documentation, tutorials, Stack Overflow. Everything exists for these models to metabolize. They don't need to invent logic from scratch. They just interpolate across the millions of precedents already set on the internet. So there's this curious dynamic at play where many developers, especially those relying on autocomplete tools, are kind of inexpert observers. If the generated code compiles and looks plausible, it's often accepted without scrutiny because it kind of mirrors the journey that most programmers took to learn how to program, of basically copy and pasting junk from the internet that kind of looked plausible and kind of worked. And that's kind of okay. I don't think that's offensive. It's just, it reflects the thing that we are. And this tolerance for surface level correctness allows models to appear more capable than they truly are, especially given we have like a wealth of static analysis tools and compilers to tell us when they got it wrong, right? So it's really easy for us to factually prove that the model got programming wrong. So while software engineering is like undeniably complex as a practice, the nature of code makes it unusually well suited to being modeled in language systems. And that's why code completion works, not because the models understand software, but because the software is one of the few domains where statistical prediction aligns neatly with utility, right? That's why it works. So we're now in the bullshit era. Sorry, there's one swear on the slide. I can't avoid that. These initial breakthroughs in accuracy got us to a place where we had a product hype cycle that gave us things like the Devin AI. Has anyone seen the Devin AI? Anyone remember this? Okay, one. So with the AI hype, God, drink. I meant all of you. So the hype cycle is so accelerated that you might not have heard of Devin or might not remember it if you've heard of it. But it was touted as the world's first truly autonomous software engineer. And this was like only about 14 months ago, but it feels like 200 years in internet time. So it was developed by a company called Cognition Labs, and I want to air quote developed by and company. It was pitched as a breakthrough, an agent that could plan, code, debug, and even complete freelance tasks. So they ran this like wonderful promotional video where it was completing a job on Upwork. It was like finding a job and doing it, and you could watch it build the thing. The promotional material was polished, almost too polished. Demos showed Devin building websites, solving coding challenges, the lot. Now, there's a whole lot of YouTube videos that came out the week later tearing into this thing, right? In fact, I think I was a guest on a random podcast where they were like, take a look at this cool thing. And I was like, that looks like bleep, bleep. Because it looked like bleep, bleep to me. Because it was. What we saw, I love this word, we saw a load of bullshots, right? Which is a word that was borrowed from the video game industry, who used to use it to describe when game publishers would take game assets and make these amazing dynamic screenshots of not the video game and put them on the boxes and send them to magazines. Bullshots. So the system often failed to complete tasks. It misunderstood requirements, and it was producing code that was either irrelevant or unusable. And if you like slowed down their demo video, you could see the, as Apple would put it, sequence shortened as they were editing out the bits where it was getting things wrong and they were steering it back on track, right? Despite that, Cognition Labs secured $21 million in funding at a valuation worth $2 billion because our industry truly is a clown show. Just smoke and mirrors rather than substance, right? Like, it's the truth. And I think that's really defined this middle era of the AI hype cycle, right? Just a bunch of products you don't want, funded by opportunistic people you do not like, trying to do things you either don't need or aren't really possible, right? Very welcome to 2024. Which is a shame, again, because I think there's loads of really interesting territory here, and we'll get back to the interesting stuff. But it feels like we have to accept that we're absolutely in a bubble. But that doesn't invalidate the technology utility in this thing. Like, you know, the dot-com crash happened, and it didn't mean computers were bad. It just got rid of the gold rush people. And so I welcome the popping of the AI bubble. I think it will be extremely, extremely funny. Okay, so there's this growing sense now that the large language models, I'm on slide 11 of 27. We're going to go faster. I didn't realize this was this long. The models have plateaued, right, which is really interesting. And not in terms of marketing, of course, so that continues in full force. People will sell you the thing. But in terms of the actual capability, like the curve is flattening now. Models aren't getting dramatically better, and they're taking longer to arrive. If you trace the timeline, the gaps between the major releases are widening. You can just see it, right? GPT-2 launched in 2019. GPT-3 was mid-2020. GPT-4 was March 2023. And they put a lot of point releases in between, pretending they were doing real work. But what was actually happening was they realized that model development is non-deterministic because they're just retraining the models, and they were getting worse results. Really difficult. GPT-5, after months of speculation, was mid-2025. That's a 2-year gap. And it's not just about engineering caution. It's just the diminishing returns of brute forcing a piece of software. So the hype around GPT-5 was especially interesting. It's immense, right? It was going to change the world. It was going to redefine intelligence. It was going to make GPT-4 look like a toy. But what actually shipped was something a lot more pragmatic, actually. Now, does anyone know what GPT-4 actually is? Anyone got a shout-out phrase? It's a model router. It's not a model at all. There's a GPT-5 thinking model, sure, but it's not a monolithic leap forward. It's a system that dynamically routes requests to smaller, cheaper models where possible, right? It reserves the heavyweight inference for tasks that really demand it. So the idea of the fronting model is to work out if it's a hard problem and give it to the smart model, otherwise to give you the cheap one. Which is why if you want GPT-5 to be any good, you have to say something like, please, really, really think deeply, really, really deeply. I really, really mean it. Can you actually do the work, please? And then you'll get a good result out of GPT-5. It's kind of funny. But the truth is that's not a criticism, right? It's a sign of maturity. The industry is reckoning with this reality that training sufficiently wide models is just becoming prohibitively expensive. And the compute budgets required to push past the current performance ceilings are just staggering, right? Marginal gains with exponential costs. So incremental improvements aren't really enough to justify the spend. So instead of chasing raw capability, developers are just pivoting towards efficiency with smarter routing, better caching, more specialized submodels. I think GPT-5 is really emblematic of that shift, right? It's not a singular model, it's just a proxy. And I think that's realistic, and it signals a move away from hype-driven escalation towards architectural pragmatism, and that's a cool thing. Now, okay, we're gonna come with me into the pit of despair. Okay, that's my death metal album. So you can't talk about technology born from exciting abundance without inspecting the rest of the landscape. So with some apologies, we're going to sink into the pit of despair for a few minutes. Okay, so technological revolutions have always been sold as progress, always. But beneath the surface, they've constantly served as mechanisms for consolidating power, often at the direct expense of the people whose labor they have displaced. Eesh. The narrative of innovation rarely includes the wreckage it leaves behind, and it's easy to forget, but let's just think about a couple of good examples here to prove my point. Let's start with the railways. Ooh. So the arrival of trains in the 19th century transformed economies. True story. Also tore through communities, it enabled the rapid movement of goods and people, centralized commerce, and accelerated industrialization. Also obliterated local economies, displaced rural populations, and concentrated wealth around urban centers and railway barons. Oops. So entire towns rotted away as a result of the railways. How about the mills? I'm originally from Manchester, famous mill town, because it's a swamp. So textile mills were the poster children for the first industrial revolution. They introduced mechanized production, scaled output, and created new urban workforces. They also ushered in brutal working conditions, child labor, and the collapse of cottage industries. Oh, God. Pit of despair is warm. Skilled artisans were replaced by machines operated by unskilled laborers, and mostly women and children, women and children first, working long hours for starvation wages. You know, if there was ever a good highlight of this, it's how the expression Luddites has slid into the popular lexicon. You know the origin of this term? Great, it's really interesting. So the Luddites were a group of skilled textile workers in the early 19th century England who protested against the introduction of mechanized machinery. I don't believe I wrote the phrase mechanized machinery in my notes. Brilliant. They were experts at stocking frames, spinning frames, and power looms, and they saw that all those things were being taken away by industrialization. The Luddites weren't anti-technology, they were just anti-exploitation, and they saw their livelihoods destroyed by machines that allowed factory owners to hire cheaper, less skilled labor. There's a bit of like a sign that says "You are here," right? Am I kind of here? Their protests were never against progress. They just were against the deliberate use of technology to undermine wages and working conditions. History caricatures them as backwards, but they were critics of a system that was used that used innovation not to uplift, but to extract wealth. So I read this really great essay. This is the last really miserable slide, I really promise. I read this really amazing essay recently by, I'm going to massacre a Polish name, I think here, Krystyna Wojtke, W-O-D-T-K-E. I'm very, very sorry. I've never heard it said out loud. And it was titled, I love generative AI, but I hate the companies building it. And I think it does a really good job of capturing the complexity in this space, and I would really recommend you read it if you can find it. So in this piece, she explains how generative AI is really this astonishing thing, a leap forward in creativity, productivity, and possibility. She opens up the piece saying how much she admires the technology itself and how it can write and draw and code and even teach. But her love for the tool is quickly overshadowed by this deep unease that the companies that are building these technologies are, in her view, reckless, profit-driven, and ethically compromised organizations. She draws this really sharp line between the brilliance of the tool and the behavior of the people that are doing the work. Now, the core of her argument is that generative AI is not inherently harmful, but the way it's being developed and deployed absolutely is. And she criticizes big tech for ignoring consent, where artists and creators have their work scraped and fed into models without permission, for evading accountability with companies claiming that their models are trained on public data, kind of sidestepping the moral and legal implications of using copyright material, and undermining livelihoods where instead of empowering creatives, the tools are used and positioned to replace them, mostly without compensation. Very, very similar to the previous industrial revolution. And she's especially concerned about broadly the erosion of trust, where users are being asked to embrace AI while being kept in the dark about how it really works and what data it uses and who benefits without transparency, right? And there are really, like the article's fascinating, but it's full of really, really bleak examples. I'm just going to share two. The first one is that XAI ran unpermitted gas turbines because the local state of, wherever Memphis is, I forget, around Memphis, Illinois? I don't know geography. Yeah, ran gas turbines that poisoned the local black population to train their models because they couldn't get power from the grid. That was last year. Meta outsources the labeling and content moderation of traumatic content to poor countries, effectively paying slave wages in Kenya and Ghana to make people categorize deeply traumatic images to train their models. And in fact, when open to scrutiny, Meta, everybody else ran away. Meta bought the sodding company. Like, so yeah, and when you actually read the full examples, it's a lot worse than it sounds. This is the human work. This is the cost of this. It's bleak. Yet, in the piece, she doesn't call for abandoning AI. She calls for like an ethical stewardship, right? She wants to see content-based training, consent-based training even, fair compensation, open governance, right? She believes that the potential is right there for AI to augment human creativity, not to replace it, but that the future is not going to arrive if we let the current tech oil barons who are running the AI programs continue to run them. It's not going to happen, right? Sorry for the soapbox. So I want to share a bit of optimism for the future, right? So here's a thought that I've been having the more I think about this kind of mass exploitation of compute. Okay, the genie is out of the bottle. The mass harvesting of publicly accessible data to train large models has already happened. The harm has already happened. You can't undo it. But what we can do is we can legislate for a more equitable exchange of value going forwards, right? So I'm increasingly convinced that models trained on publicly scraped data, I'm not going to say public data or legally available data, just data that's been sourced in the open, should be forced into the public domain, right? I think not necessarily in terms of like operational access. Vendors can still train these models, host them, and sell value-added versions. But I think we should force any data trained on an open data source or an available data source to share its underlying weights and models. And we should legislate everywhere to force that to happen. If the data was public, the model should be too. That's the line. Anything else is just a myth of openness, right? I think that's kind of the, like, almost inspired by the strong copyleft from the free software movement, but for models, right? It doesn't undo the exploitation of human labor, and it doesn't retroactively compensate the people whose original work was stolen either, frankly. But it does begin to level the playing field by introducing a regulatory mechanism that acknowledges the asymmetry of power and attempts to rebalance it, right? And I think that's where we've been struggling with large technical organizations in the last 20 years. Vendors can do open core models, right? They can release the base and retain the tooling and monetize the interfaces, and they can still make money doing this thing. I'm not against business. But I think we should use the techniques that made open source a radical idea. And open source has been kind of compromised by corporate culture also, but we can use those same techniques, right? Copyleft and community governance and transparency, and we can repurpose them to constrain the worst excesses in model development. We're not going to fix the past, and I don't think it's perfect justice, but it might be a leash. So that's the dark stuff. Sorry for the bummer. I hope it was interesting, though. Okay, so the next wave, where are we going? 40 minutes in, okay, I'm going to get 3 times as long as I thought it was going to be. I apologize. You're locked in here with me. Okay, one of the most important shifts in understanding AI today is recognizing that models alone are no longer enough, right? Not enough. The era of just like a model behind an API is ending, and what's coming next is not just bigger models, but I think just systems, right? Like real systems. And I think the next generation of consumer-facing AI will be multi-model, multi-runtime, and deeply orchestrated, right? Large language models will still play like a central role, but they're going to be flanked with similar specialized focal models, each tuned to specific tasks, domains, or modalities. So there'll be a cottage industry of these focal models. They're not going to operate in isolation. They're going to be routed dynamically, much like GPT-5 as a model router at the top. But the real leap forward isn't just in model composition. It's in the emergence of ancillary systems that augment and extend what a model can do. Right, so over the past 8 or 9 months, there have been a couple of protocols that have been starting to shape this landscape. So I guess hands up, have you heard of MCP? Yeah, about half the room. So MCP, the Model Context Protocol, is the formalization of what was previously called RAG, Resource Augmented Generation, where your model can learn to call out to other systems to put facts in. It's why models can now like do basic maths, which they couldn't do before, or check train times instead of just telling you that every train arrives at 9 in the morning, because of course it does. So that's really cool, and that's now that's 9 months old and is in everything now. And we're also going to see people adopting the agent-to-agent protocol that governs how agents interact with each other, and that's a Google thing. Still in active development, I think, but it's laying the groundwork for the security model and how you pass authentication between different models, so that you can open your banking app and say, what's my balance, or open your Siri and say, what's my balance. I think these two things together point to this future where AI is no longer a single model answering queries, but a constellation of interoperable components, models, agents, and runtimes all working together, really. So I think it's actually more of a return to traditional systems thinking, but with models at the core rather than at the periphery. And I think this shift really matters, because as we move beyond this illusion of singular intelligence, we begin to see the real architecture of AI as it emerges, right? Like, we're never going to get general AI, but what will look like it is a system of a constellation of models. And I think that's the lens you need to look at this through to understand where everything is going. So One of the more accidental insights from the Devin demo was how central iteration was becoming in the rise of AI agents, right? Not just as like a technical capability, but as the design principle. And I think the future of agentic systems isn't about single shot brilliance, it's about continuous refinement and feedback loops and collaborative workflows, right? And I think GitHub Copilot and Claude Code have kind of already trailblazed in this space, right? They're not just models wrapped in a UI, they're systems wrapped in a workflow of interacting with the models. And they represent the shift from passive autocomplete to active participation. So even more compelling is that model parallelism is now coming. And the true thing is that this isn't speculative, it's commodity now, it's available to everybody. So we're starting to see the shift in how AI models are built and deployed, right? And it's not just about making them bigger. We've got these focal models, single focus models. It's a great term. JetBrains came up with it, I believe. They're kind of leaning in with language-specific models embedded in their IDEs, which is super interesting. Microsoft's recent research project, there's a project called Orca 2, shows that you can train smaller models from the output of larger models generating rubbish. And they proved that actually the resulting small models are just as effective as the big models that were generating garbage training data, which is fascinating. We're going to get a cottage industry of this, right? And you heard of DeepSeek, right? The Chinese one? That's how they did it. There was this great news story like, oh, DeepSeek, we trained it for £5. And what they actually did is they got GPT and they got it to generate a lot of training data and they trained it on that. And so whilst they may have trained it for like, I don't know, 100 grand, they trained it also on the millions of pounds that everybody else had already poured in. So it was a bit, yeah, it's a good way to tank the American stock market, isn't it, for a joke? Just say you made a big model for $5. I think, you know, smaller models ultimately though mean more portability, and you can run them locally, and you can embed them in apps, and you can deploy them, and that becomes interesting. I'm trying to go faster now. Okay, so one of the more surprising elements of the AI space is it turned out that Apple accidentally made a really good laptop for this with their shared memory on the M series of MacBooks. So we've accidentally ended up with this really tight integration between CPUs and GPUs that can do model computations really, really quickly on local devices. Don't know how many of you have a MacBook. I'm a die-hard Windows guy, and I bought a MacBook last year for this. Like, sod it, I'll just use macOS. It's not called that anymore, is it? It's like OS whatever. Other vendors are starting to catch up, and I think what we're going to see in the next 12 months is we're going to see hardware change around these capabilities. You see it now with people buying Macs. You see people waiting to see what Qualcomm are going to do, and they're going to start embedding their memory on the chips. And everyone's kind of waiting on NVIDIA, right? Because this stuff is going to get fast and parallel. NVIDIA are looking to build ARM-based GPUs to supercharge the work that they're already doing in data centers, right? And I think it's going to be a game changer for model portability. And I think what this points to is like a really clear trend that we're heading into an era of on-device focal models. And what that is the commoditization of this entire space. So all the businesses that are just selling you a model behind an API are basically going to collapse if their models are no good within 2 years, right? And I think, you know, anyone that's just building a startup that's 3 chat GPTs in a trench coat, not happening. So I want to end with some predictions. This is a little bit of guidance how to deal with your own technology strategy as well in the face of a wildly unpredictable AI landscape. Like irony well accepted of predicting things in an unpredictable space. So I think the current wave of LLMs are powering technology, the next evolution of Google Assistant and Cortana and Siri and Alexa, the thing on the edge that turns natural language into questions and commands, has been like running at for the last 20 years. Right? We've been trying to do this forever. This is just a through line. It was popularized by Alexa in 2014, but what we're going to end up with is those tools being the UI to a lot of read-only activities that you would traditionally use web for, right? We're going to have some large models embedded in those tools that will marginally improve over time, but they're not going to be good at doing any hard or detailed work. They're going to be too general. Most of the current critique focuses heavily on the fact that the models aren't great, but actually it doesn't really matter. They're all going to use MCP and the agent-to-agent protocol to power the next wave of AI. And what's going to happen is people are going to start wrapping and systemizing their own APIs and protocol shifting to these new technologies, right? And when we get this right, language models will be used to interface with humans. Regular web protocols will format shift into MCP, and there will emerge basically a app store style market for this kind of stuff, right? Where people will take their 30% as they shell out to different companies' capabilities. What does this mean if you're building software? Back to web standards, all of you. Back to web standards, and that's great. Like, I love this, right? I think it's easier for the thing you do to be described as APIs and metadata and commands. If you can do that, actually MCP and agent to agent's a really, really simple format shift for you. So I think people more than ever should be building their businesses on APIs today. How about if I went back in time to 2010, I'd probably be saying the same thing, which is quite funny. I think it's a really small leap from there to imagine that we might extend DNS to be a registry of commands that different businesses can fulfill and their billing models. Why not, right? Why not? Like, it seems like the most obvious shift. And when you get there, people will start pretending we have AGI. We obviously won't have AGI. It's still just going to be a load of models talking to each other, but people will definitely sell at you as AGI. The second order effects, the read-only portions of most apps is going to disappear. Why would you check the train times on a screen if you can just say, hey Siri, when's my train? And it knows what train you get and how to connect to its own provider to query their API in natural language. And I think that's kind of awesome, right? We've been trying this forever with Hatios and all those kind of things. So I think within a few years, it's unlikely that people are going to be opening your Apple web page to check on data. They will come for content-rich experiences and creative experiences, but like anything that's simple, gone. Okay, here's the fun thing. I'm just reading my notes. That's cool. Yeah, okay, so this isn't a prediction because most of this stuff works now. The interesting thing is yesterday, Google launched a protocol called A2P, agent payments. Yeah, it's just this thing, right? It's happening now. Maybe it's a year away in total. Okay, so what does this mean for technology vendors? Just keep providing APIs. If you can't do APIs, I'm really going to fast forward because I can see the time. I basically said most of that. That's cool. Okay, finally, engineering jobs are going to change, but people are going to get over the hiring malaise. Surely we don't need those noisy nerds anymore. And we're going to realize that the biggest challenge in writing software isn't writing it, it's operating it, right? Software organizations will simply reach the conclusion that using models to help maintain, remove, and reduce and optimize code is saner and more sustainable than just pouring more code into the tire fire, right? Because just making more code is actually a worse place, not a better place. And I think this is the obvious through line, right? The predictable end to everything. And that's where we get to. And it's kind of the internet dream, right? Like a commoditized routing protocol to lots of independent businesses that can sell specially trained things that they can train on expert systems in their own domain. Actually kind of cool, kind of here for it. Okay. How much time do I have? Is everyone tired? Everyone bored? Everyone wants to go to the pub. All right. I'll give you the 3 bullet points of the technology strategy. Keep AI at the edge of your software. Build web standards and protocol shift. And what else have I got in here? Yeah, that's basically it. That's basically it. Question? Nah, screw cryptocurrency, idiots. I want to go to the pub. Go on. That's a really great question because it might all of a sudden speed up the processing rate of this stuff. I'm terrified of quantum computing. I'm terrified of quantum computing. The moment quantum computing lands, all of cryptography is broken and everyone has a very, very bad day for the rest of all time. I personally hope quantum computing doesn't happen in a hurry. You love crypto, right? Joking. I don't understand how the two things are the same. I feel like if quantum computing happens, crypto is broken. And yeah, everything is broken, but including crypto. And crypto's entire thing is like stateless money that can't be controlled. And if your bank can be cryptographically exploited, you're kind of effed. I am not smart enough to write a talk on quantum computing. No, it's good. I'll leave you on one sentence, which is follow John Carmack. Every talk I do just says John Carmack's a smart man. He when he left Oculus, he started a research project in general purpose AI with his son. I figure if the guy that invented the 3D graphics card market and good video games can decide that he's going all in on this, it's not full of crap. That's what I'll leave you on. And Google's going to do something else. Have fun. Thank you. Sorry it was so long.